Hello everyone and welcome to a video on the formation of sedimentary rock. This is a rock. Like other rocks, it is made up of solid material that in turn is made up of a collection of minerals clumped together in a solid mass. There are different types of rocks, but those rocks have been placed in three main groups called rock types. The first rock type we'll be looking at is igneous rock. So how igneous rock forms is when magma from Earth's mantle reaches Earth's surface, or the surface of Earth's crust, through volcanic activity, for example, which the magma becomes lava. When the lava cools down, it forms solid rock that is classified as igneous rock. So when it comes to the three rock types, I would definitely argue that igneous rock is the most rock and roll because of how it is formed. And I just realized I made a rock pun, which this time is unintentional, but full disclosure, I actually have a few of them purposely loaded in the chamber of this video, which I hope you appreciate, by the way. All right, so an igneous rock type that you might be familiar with is obsidian. The next next rock type we'll be looking at is metamorphic rock, which is formed when rock undergoes high amounts of heat and pressure, which transforms the rock into metamorphic rock, thus the name. It goes through a transformation through heat and pressure, so I guess it metamorphosizes the rock. You can actually see, by the way, in this picture, these lines are or were one strata from sedimentary rock before it became metamorphic rock. I just realized I'm going too far into it, but to keep it simple, these lines represent different layering of rock. So as the rock formed, it formed through different layers first, right? So each layer represents, or each line represents a rock layer formation. And the different colors of the layers actually show you that not every layer is the same in chemical composition. That's because each layer had different things, or there were different things that formed that layer, and so the color is different. This is nice, by the way, and I don't mean like the picture's nice. I mean, it is nice, but the rock is called nice, so that's there. Right, so the next one we're looking at is Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. All right, you got me. He's not a rock, but I mean, you have to admit, in terms of large, solid, hairless objects on the Earth's surface, he's definitely up there. Okay, seriously, the third type of rock is called sedimentary rock. This is sandstone, by the way. It's very pretty. Again, you can see the different layers. But the question that we need to answer in this video is, how is sedimentary rock formed? And this is where I need you to focus, because I'm about to Mr. Miyagi you. So, first we have rocks on the land. Those rocks undergo weathering, whether it be by wind or water, which is called erosion. This forms rock particles, so pieces of those rocks are chipped off over time, and they end up in the ocean, and they sink to the ocean floor, and they collect at the bottom, which brings us to our next step called deposition. It's not just rock particles that end up at the bottom, but anything that dies in the ocean also ends up there, along with the rock particles mixed in. Over time, more and more layers form, which brings us to our next step, which is compaction. Compaction is created when more and more layers form on top of previously deposited rock particles and materials, causing them to become compact, basically compressed by all the pressure of the layers above them, which creates sediment. Over more time, more and more layers form, and this creates more pressure for the layers further down, and the pressure is so great that it actually squeezes or forces out any water in between the particles of the sediment, resulting in cementation, which is basically the gluing of all those particles together into a solid mass, which is referred to as a rock. And this is how sedimentary rock forms. All right, there we have it. Done and dusted. Oh, What's that? You want me to do it slower and in a more step-by-step kind of way? All right, but don't tell me I don't do anything for you. All right, so if we do a step-by-step, we have a rock, or we have large rocks, whether it be clumped together on a mountain or lying separately on the land. Those rocks go through weathering, done by wind or water, which breaks pieces, really tiny pieces of those rocks off, and over time they accumulate. You might see this as sand, right? So sand is actually rocks, that pieces of rock that's broken off. This is called erosion, right? Rock erosion. What happens to those particles, rock particles, is that they get blown away or washed away by rainwater, end up in a river maybe, and they end up in the ocean. And because the rock particles are denser than ocean water, they always end up at the bottom on the sea floor. Why do they always end up in the ocean? Or they don't always, but why does so much of this end up in the ocean? It's because the ocean actually covers 70% or more than 70% of Earth's surface. So the chances are very likely that they will end up there, which they do. All right, so in this step, we get sand particles, or we get rock particles falling or floating to the bottom of the ocean, and they accumulate there. Not just them, but anything that lives in the ocean, any organic materials as well, from living things such as algae and sea plants, will end up there. Dead animals, like the remains of the animals, like fish skeletons and whale skeletons, their bones get mixed up in there as well. SpongeBob SquarePants, obviously, and maybe even Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. Look, I'm not saying that he will, but I'm definitely not saying that it's impossible. Like, you never know what could happen. All right, Salt Bay will represent the continuous sprinkling of these rock particles coming into the ocean and depositing at the bottom of the ocean on the ocean floor, which is why we call this step deposition. So we went from erosion, creating these sand particles, to the depositing of those particles at the seafloor, which is deposition. In our next step, in the third step, what we had is the particles were deposited on the seafloor, and as they accumulate, more and more layers form. So this accumulation of particles doesn't stop. It keeps going, and this just keeps adding more and more, and so newer particles will fall on top of the older particles, causing the older particles to become compressed into a layer of material, and the layer gets crushed and compressed by the accumulating pressure created by the deposition of more and more particles over time. This pressure causes the older layers to become more compressed into a material called sediment, which you can actually, this is what sediment looks like over here. You've seen it if you've ever like dug up or held up, like, you know, if you've dug into a river or on the ocean, you maybe explored the beach or the ocean, you've picked up this, and what this is actually sediment, like pieces of rocks and of older rocks and other things mixed together, seashells, etc. And this is actually loose sediment that's been carried off by underwater currents, and so you were able to access them. Not all of it, actually most of it doesn't come back to the surface, and so it stays underneath all those layers accumulating. This step, by the way, is called compaction. Then for our last step, we have that layer that we had previously, the brown one. It gets covered with more and more and more layers accumulate over time, by the way, which can take thousands, hundreds of thousands of years to happen. And all that pressure keeps building up until the pressure is so much that it squeezes out any liquids, any water between the particles, and in any organic matter, all that water is squeezed out in between the particles, resulting in those particles gluing to each other, and forming a solid mass called sedimentary rock. This step is also called cementation, because it becomes sort of like cement, right? It's cemented together into sedimentary rock. And typically this is kind of what it would look like. This is actually a sedimentary rock called conglomerate, which is, you can see it's a mixture of many different particles fused into one solid mass. All right, that brings us finally to the different types of sedimentary rock. You get many different types, but if you are one of my learners or my students, I just want you to focus or get to know limestone, which is mainly a mixture of calcium from the remains of dead animals, like especially snails. Their shells have lots of calcium mixed in with rock particles like quartz crystals, for example. Then we get sandstone, which is mainly rock particles fused together or cemented together into a rock. And you also get shale, which is again is a mixture of plant material, actually a lot of plant material mixed in with rock particles as well. Right, so I hope that helped, and I hope that was interesting. I mean, rocks, what can be more interesting than that? Never stop learning, stay awesome. Till next time.